This talk is to be meant as part of let's say, a wider discussion on ways of working and consulting values. But I just wanted to do a quick focus, especially on the remote working angle, because I've been doing that for a long time now, and the more I do it, the more I become convinced that, for most part, it's actually more effective than being together in an office. There was a great quote I saw once on Twitter that said what's really important is collocation of purpose. It's not collocation of bodies, right? So, but how do we achieve that while being remote? So let's start by that. You have to engage in a much more intensive way with the person that's on the other side, whether it's the remote and another equal experts colleague, or even more importantly, if it's a client person. You have to be very, very open and transparent about the way you're working and what you're doing. For example, one of the things that was uncomfortable at first, but I started doing it, was really effective, is just always sharing my desktop. Anyone can join, and anyone can see what I'm working on. That also forces you to have a strong discipline in the way you're doing, right? The fact that you're remote doesn't necessarily mean that you can, let's say, take a break and not inform the people on the other side that you just took a break, because that people wouldn't know and probably would have the expectation of wanted to have a quick chat with you, and they can't, right? So if you need to have a break, and you might need to have a break, well, just announce that and say, well, I'm going to be unavailable for X period, and check if that's okay with the rest of the team. The other thing is about more on, let's say, on the technical angle. I think these days, bandwidth is pretty cheaply available. Apparently not in offices. I don't think we're that different here. I think things are better, but I think the kind of connectivity that we get at home is much better than whatever company has these days. I don't know why, but that seems to be the case. But usually, as long as you have decent enough uplink, downlink, the quality that you get from the experience that you get from sharing, let's say, a live desktop session could be pretty much seamless, right? And that's awesome. The other thing that I would like to raise is you can have it's much easier to organize impromptu meetings or discussions about something, right? Because you don't have to gather people in a meeting room, which seems to be a pain point in every company I've worked with in the past 20 years. You have to gather people to discuss. We don't need, well, just assemble an informal group and just, well, let's have an hangout. Let's just share the desktop and discuss ideas. Let's experiment together, okay? That's something that's really easy to do on a remote setting, but it's really hard to do in a typical office setting. The other one is pairing, and that's something that we have to manage carefully, because although I agree that remote pairing is much more effective than pairing at the office due to the lack of distractions, that can also be a problem, because as you move through, your focus tends to be much more intense. But you also get more tired at the end of the day, because either there's no office distractions, or a colleague that tells a joke and you get to just relax a bit. You tend to be constantly on it. So you do have to make an effort to maybe or pause, or maybe just do a quick break and agree with the person on the other side. Other things, there are things here that I'm not saying, but I think they go almost without mentioning, like you're not wasting time commuting, and that's a big plus. You can use that time for whatever you want. Could be do the laundry. That's what I tend to do. The magic dirty bag box disappeared. once I got married, so have to deal with that. Other things that are important. You have to adopt. Yep.
Do you want to talk about that, Miguel?
No. I can, but I don't want to. Yeah. You have to be, and this is probably where I'm starting to touch some of the pain points that I feel even with colleagues. You have to be way more direct than probably you would be if you were in a personal setting. So those that have worked with me probably have already experienced that. I tend to be a bit too direct, but I think you really, if you're in a remote setting, you really have to be, because but you have to manage that directness carefully, in the sense that you have to touch the problem immediately, but try to empty the emotional side of it, so that you can address things quickly. Because as being remote, the opportunities to get emotional cues from the other side become very limited. So it's very easy to get the wrong impression from what the other person intends. So one way to address that is just to discuss ways of working. For example, you're at a client, you're someone that has never worked with you before. Let's say on the first time you get to talk, let's discuss that. Let's discuss how we're going to work. Let's discuss how we prefer to communicate or why certain things are important. And if you get that out of the way, it goes a long way to make working remotely and in a collaborative setting much easier. Okay, I think I've heard about all the different issues that have happened in the past about this directness thing, and the cultural angle of some cultures prefer more direct, others. I think it's at the end of the day it's a bit bullshit, because if you address it early on and properly, it doesn't really matter, because you've all agreed on the rules of communication. Well, not the rules. Rules is a bit of a strong word, but on a way of discussing. And I'm talking that of course I'm speaking from my own experience here. Of course, it cannot speak for everyone, but it has been varied from Nigeria to Sweden, United States, Switzerland, Greece, UK. So I mean, there's cultures on every extremes you could think of. I mean, if you can compare Nigeria to Sweden, or Switzerland with Portugal, or Greece with UK, there on several angles there could be at extremes. But you can bring people together if you let's try to work on this way and explain why, so that the cultural let's say hints don't matter as much. So that you don't rely on possible hidden messages that are not there, because you've discussed this. You've discussed how you intend to work. The other thing I think it's really important, and especially from our office, is that we need to have way more commitment to the project, to the mission, than probably the people that are on the other side, and that's really important to make sure that we have the credibility and the trust to operate. Okay, that's especially important as you're, let's say, entering a new client. That new client probably not that open to remote working. Probably people have a mistrust on remote working, because probably in the past it has been used for people to slack off, not really do useful work. So I think we have a lot to make up to convince people that remote working can be really effective, and actually I think to some extent more effective than working in an office setting. That's all for now. I'd really, if you have questions, please raise your hand, comments. I really like to have a discussion, because I think that these concerns are not taken by everyone equally within the company. Yeah, sure.
Obviously, I'm not looking at this company
Mm-hmm.
for all the best purpose of life.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that, but I have been a consultant previously for about 7 years, and I used to be co-located at client's place, so I can see the process, but I haven't really worked from remote working with the client. My question is the comment you made about how you initially set up the one talking about upfront discussion on how we work, how you guys work, so with the clients, so how both of us will be working. There are two things about it. One, I find that if you discuss it upfront, what is being agreed. Okay, so what is being agreed is based on what you say and what they say. There's the probability of what they say might not be what they really do in real life, because that happens all the time. I think I work this way, but actually what you realize is, I don't know, I work with Victor, so Victor, and he probably thinks that whatever I say I work is not how I actually work, and then he needs to figure that out. So that's one thing. So therefore that agreement can still have a misinterpretation, so we probably want to work completely. The other thing about it, what I find is that emotional cue, so the reason I'm here is because I'm trying to build up that relationship, and what I find is that without that, and when you divorce emotion from the discussion, I find the discussion becomes so harsh, and things that might not be a criticism, even though we're talking about the project, it becomes a criticism. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, but it's important to mention. I'll try to repeat the question. Thanks for the label. So I'll try to repeat the question for the person, for the benefit of whoever is going to watch the YouTube, and then João, which is away. Please correct me if I didn't get it wrong. So too long didn't read is. Well, the fact that we might agree on something on the first conversation, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people understood or actually agreed with it. And the second one was, well, the lack of emotion might actually be an interest to building trust and the relationship. So, first point, the fact that you had an initial conversation doesn't mean that it was end-all discussion, like the conversation to end all of the conversations about the way you're working. It's just a matter of avoiding the initial as much as possible, just to set the scene. But that's something you always have to continually iterate and improve on. I'll give you examples, especially, and as you mentioned, that's especially important for companies that or people that haven't worked in this way. People might say, well, we have to let's say, trying to get a practical example of something. Let's say, respect the fact that we've agreed to do something at a certain time, right? Something as simple as that. We've made a commitment, and something will get done or delivered or discussed at a given time, and either side doesn't do it, right? For some reason, right? How do you deal with that? Well, you have to continually discuss. Well, if it was a really important thing, right? You really have to address that and make sure that people continuously improve to respect that agreement that was made on doing things on time and properly, right? More on the emotion side, I think it doesn't mean that you have to be completely emotionless. This is especially meant for discussions where probably the views can be on opposite extremes. Because I mean, when life is good, everyone is okay. It's only when things get a bit, when you have a hard problem to solve and you have opposing views, where emotions can get in the way. And if you never got into the habit of excluding your own persona from the argument, then the tension appears at the worst possible moment, and it won't help you. And that can become a problem if uh, in two ways. One is either we get a conflict between the parties involved, so that's a problem. And there's yet another problem that people sometimes don't speak of because it's not visible or immediately visible, is the discussion didn't take place at all because people were afraid of hurting the other side, or somehow they didn't get, they'd rather avoid the conflict instead of solving the problem. And those are two problems, right? One is visible because, well, people got together and there was a conflict. And the other one is the problem was not addressed, right?
This and unknown implicit assumptions, and I find that when I build a relationship, as in like when we're together and build a relationship that way, there are times where most of the time you really jump to give more leeway to the other party and the other party giving you more leeway. You understand? Because sometimes you say a certain word, it could be a joke, it could be a certain meaning, but it comes from a good place. Whereas if I don't have that face-to-face contact with you, like physical face-to-face contact, it's easier for me to jump into bad things.
Mm-hmm. But it's also an easy way to mitigate that, although it might seem awkward if people don't do that naturally, is just to ask questions to the other person just to make sure that that person responds what you expect that person to respond, if it had understood what you meant. If you get into the habit of doing that, I think it's really easy to avoid misunderstandings. But the thing is, don't ever assume, and I think that also applies in face-to-face conversations with people that you work with. It's not. It's especially important on a remote setting, but it also applies. I mean, on a day-to-day basis with your colleagues. But I think it's especially more and more important as, I mean, sometimes the cultural gaps are really intense. And it could be not even the personal side, but even the technical side. We give you an example from a project I had. So you agreed on a communication protocol where you would use a JMS queue to deliver messages, and sometimes we've set everything up, and well, the other guy, well, we're having problems. It doesn't accept the connection. I said, well, no, we've tested this, but let's instead of, let's say, starting a discussion or a big email chain about the issue, well, let's pair together on this. Let's sit together. Show me what you're trying to do, and let's walk you through. So what the other side was trying to do is actually to open a direct socket connection to the JMS server. Turns out they never heard of JMS before, believe it or not. And it could have been like a big problem, but it was diffused immediately because we understood what was the problem. We understood that they have a lack of understanding, and for example, we mitigated that issue just by doing a small code sample that they could use. Well, this is how you connect, and here it is. Use it. And that was especially important because it was a project that was being managed like several thousand kilometers away, and it was not something that you could quickly fly in the other day, as we can, for example, from London to Lisbon, or pretty much from Lisbon to every other place in Europe. You just wouldn't go there because it would be really hard. But as long as you have a direct communication and upfront, and nobody got offended, we understood that we would have to do things in a very different way because they had really good people on the other side. They had the right attitude, but they simply never had the experience of using certain things. So we cannot. We had to empty all our assumptions about what we expect the other side to know, and we try to preempt problems just by providing code samples or cookbook examples to them, so that they could integrate with the work that we're doing. And in the end, everything worked out perfectly. So, more questions? Everything is being a bit shy. I really thank you for your comments. But I think it's offered an opportunity to discuss a bit more.
What are your thoughts on what you think we should do like setting up the initial relationship. I mean, for example, my experience is a bit limited on this, but I found that webcams, and I think is just using webcams on all the
Yeah.
does a great difference, even though it's, well, no one's actually reading your lips or anything, but it does make an impact.
It does. It does. It does. It does. You're not an icon. You're your face, and that. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, the comment was, how do we help me? I'll try to rephrase it, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is how to ensure the best possible initial contact. Yeah, I mean, being present, being available. I mean, showing your face, showing your work, and then it's the beginning, as the quoting from Dune, is a very delicate time because it's the first impressions and all of that. But the thing is really building a relationship by delivering really good work, being always available, and that's where the discussion would merge with the consulting values that we need to have. Try to help in every way. So whenever you go to a client, we're within a certain mission statement. You go to there to solve a particular problem, but it might as well be that while you're working with the client, you might realize that they have other issues, or sometimes they have issues that they haven't realized yet, and try to help them pick trash from the floor and try to help them overcome them. I mean, the typical case is, I think it's that's pretty much true in every client I've worked for, is they usually have a continuous delivery issue, and there are many visible causes for the issues. Like, so they might have issues, instability in the pipeline. They might have infrastructure issues. They might have, I mean, the lot. But usually the root cause is ineffective unit testing practices, or the fact that they do their code and it's not properly decomposed, and they don't do TDD, and that fact that ends up boiling up into a situation where you have really long integration runs or complex branch management. But actually the root cause was something here, and they're looking at the problem at the end, expecting to solve it just by massaging bits here at the end, while the root cause is never addressed. How do you approach that, for example? And this is something that I think helps in building that trust relationship, because that the other person on the other side has to understand that you care, and you're there not just because what you're signed up for, but actually to make things better overall, right? And engage with them. It might not. The thing is, it might not be the person that you're directly talking to, but it might be someone else in the organization. But you can find out who that person is and just do it, right? And try to have a conversation and discuss problems and ways to go forward. I think that goes a long way, because it's at the end of the day, it's not only your own relationship with the person that you're working for, but your mission as I think, EE consultant in a client, right? We're there to make things better. Matthew.
So issues with different time zones and how do you mitigate them? For example, whether it's pairing with someone in a different time zone, there's only limited rollout,
Okay.
or needing someone else to help resolve the blocker. How do you minimize?
That's one of the things that actually helps not coming to the office. Of course, there are limits, right? Because if there's like a 12-hour difference between you and your client, I mean, you still have to sleep at your regular time. It might be easier for you to coordinate at a given day to do a couple of once-offs where you do like conversations, let's say, outside of your normal working hours. That's doable. Then that, no problem. But do that on a regular basis might be hard. I mean, I think we can cope easily with, let's say, 3-4 hours. I think it's as long as you don't come to the office, because if you do that, then the whole commute thing will get in the way, because people might be having stand-ups while you're just either heading to or heading out of the office. There's actually another thing I didn't mention. The fact, and this is more just an internal comment, so it doesn't really apply to our relationship with the clients, but applies more to our relationship with our colleagues. Because as you tend to spend more and more time remote, you might end up losing the connection with the day-to-day goings of the office or the persons that you work for, and I think those connections still have some values. I tend to say, half joking or half seriously, that I'm not here to make friends, and that's true. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should completely isolate yourself from the day-to-day activities. So, I mean, nothing stops you from arranging activities or coming to the office whenever there's something important to say or to discuss, like company meetings, presenting PISA talks, that kind of stuff. Anything else?
Yeah, a specific technical issue is when you remote work, one of the things that I find the hardest when speaking to people remote is whiteboarding. Whenever you're co-located, you have a whiteboard. That's a fantastic way of communicating ideas. And when you're remote, I never seem to find a proper tool. Do you have?
Well, I think nothing beats a face-to-face discussion on a whiteboard, but there are something that comes close, and sometimes it might actually be better. For example, Google Docs these days allows collaborative work, so you can draw things or draw schemas, and the advantage of doing it that way is once you're done, you actually have a physical thing that you can take and share with other people, right? I think the obstacle there is we're not that used to draw it, but once you get into the habit, it becomes second nature. I mean, even a simple ASCII art, like with characters, diagrams, I mean, works really well. The important thing is to have that while you're doing it, the other side can also edit it and make comments and manipulate it. And the Google Docs, I mean, either the presentation tool or the drawing tool works really well. Mm-hmm. And the whole experience of even writing documents collaboratively is a really good experience. And so, for example, we're agreeing on something, and we get to flush our ideas live with the other person. I think it's. I think it actually works better. This is actually orthogonal to remote working. I think we actually should even do that if we were in the same meeting room. But that's I think that's a separate discussion. Is how you work collaboratively with other people. It works much better than just creating your own document and then send for with review comments and then going back and forths and with track changes and everyone accepted and comment, where we can just do it in one go.
I think the biggest problem is when you have people satellite workers.
Mm-hmm.
You have a bunch of people in an office and one or two connected, and sometimes it's difficult. The tools, the virtual tools, they are good, but if you're mixing like the board, the physical board, and trying to stream this through the camera, and the other person doesn't.
No, streaming through the camera doesn't work.
Yeah, so
Doesn't. Yeah, don't.
Use some tool that allows both the people that are in the office. And people
Yeah. Pointing cameras at the screen is pretty much a no-no, I think. You don't get the quality, and you just disengage people. It's something that I've seen people attempt doing. But for example, if you're working with cards, let's just use Trello and share the screen while we're manipulating, because, for example, or Trello or anything else and just manipulate, and the person manipulating it is also sharing the screen so that it's visible what everyone else is doing. I think the key point here is, and I think from your comment is, what if the other persons are not used to remote working? You're just the single one. I think that's it's hard to win in that setting, really, because people would. And I think it's not fair to expect them to change their ways of working just to suit you, right? Even though they might be better, but you cannot expect that to happen, and it's not fair to expect it.
From my experiences, if one member is remote, then the whole team should work as if they're remote.
Yeah.
And this works well for any sort of meeting. So rather than have someone with a laptop pointing at a physical or a room meeting, regular room meeting with one of the members, it's not as good as if everyone's wearing headsets.
No, true.
Talking.
Yeah, but what I meant is you can. Okay, so thanks for the reminder again. So the question is, if it just takes one person to be remote for everyone else to use to make it work for everyone else to use headsets and try to use their laptops. That's true. The thing is, you cannot expect clients to just pop out headsets from nowhere and to change their ways of working just because, I mean, we're here, right? And we're really good, and then let's change everything. That's not going to happen. Yeah, it could, but I think it's a barrier of entry to us, and that's something that we would rather avoid. I mean, it may as well be that initially you won't be able to work effectively remotely, but you can always slowly and try to do that consistently and by example. For example, the pairing sessions, and I think if we do pairing with clients, and then those pairing sessions, and if they work really well, I think it goes a long way to demonstrate that remote work can be more effective, and then slowly change the ways. And maybe they start realizing, hang on, I'm actually more productive this way. I actually have a happier life this way. Let's start doing it. And it has happened with the current client that I'm in. So when we started with them, everyone was at the office. It doesn't happen anymore. So everyone is usually on their place. Sometimes they go to the office, like on Wednesdays. It actually aligns. They also go to the office on Wednesdays. But most of the team is not in the office anymore. But I think I wouldn't expect that to happen everywhere, because although they weren't used to remote working, they were actually remote work friendly to begin with. So they never objected to that. You might be in a situation where people object actively to remote working, and that's a hard place to be in. But probably from an engagement point of view, that's probably those are probably not the best clients for us, really. They're or not the best clients for us, but the best clients not to try. You should even try to engage remote working with them, because that's probably going to be a problem. It's probably better to have people on site.
Yeah, I think the other thing we introduce, people forget about this. It's the inception phase.
Mm-hmm.
We started working remotely.
Yeah.
Face to face.
Okay. I can see Diogo preparing to repeat the question. So the comment Chivago made was not doing inception at the beginning of a project. Yep, true. And the initial point I've made about agreeing on ways of working is actually also directed to mitigate that. But it might as well be that the inception is meant to cover the let's say the engagement as a whole, and that conversation is more like person to person with the people that you might end up working with on the client side, and that's a different level of relationship. because people, if you are discussing these things in an inception setting, means that you're in a group setting, the level of connection that you can make with each individual person is much more, I think, reduced.
Yeah, I think if you manage, if it's possible, if you manage to have time, or do pairing on the one, do the pairing with someone that's doing the part of the inception or something like that. I was saying this because after we went with the client and we did pairing like face to face, it helps to map a face to person, right?
Yeah, true.
The visual, and you
Yeah.
see the person and you talk to them.
So
When you go back to remote working, the connection is more strong.
yeah, repeating the question is, I think pairing as a way of working helps this, at least to the extent that people are open to pairing. That might not be the case, but I think as consultants, I think we should do as much as possible to promote pairing, because it's a really effective way of sharing knowledge and building trust and stuff. But some people might prefer just to be working on their little corner.